Well, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us at the Global Cement and Concrete Association Pavilion at COP28 in Dubai. Mike, just give me a thumbs up when we've gone live. Brilliant. So thank you for all those who are joining us online live or on a recording of this. We're at COP28 and today we're going to be talking about building sustainability assessment methods. All week at this pavilion we've been going through components of the roadmap that the Global Cement and Concrete Association published 2 years ago. I say to people, how exciting is a roadmap when everyone's got a roadmap? But this one's exciting because actually the members have committed to it. So we represent membership that is the majority of cement production globally outside China, and we've got some key members in China as well, and they have committed to this roadmap to get to zero. And you can see some of the displays around the pavilion on that. And so during the week at our events, we've gone through different components of that. Our roadmap is a whole life roadmap. It's not just what's happening within the factory gate, it goes whole life. So I'm a structural engineer, so it's a delight for me to be talking about some things today which are to do with the design community and the role that the design community can have in sustainable buildings in general, and we're very happy to talk about it in general, and obviously it's got repercussions within concrete. So in fact, just on our roadmap, the first line in it is efficiency of design and construction. If you give designers the constraint of carbon instead of the constraint of cost, then the designers can reduce the delivery of the project can have 22% less carbon just by using the material in a much more efficient way, and the versatility and the inherent benefits of concrete enable that those savings to be made. So without so much about me, we've got 4 great speakers today. We're just going to mix this up a little bit, so rather than all 4 just speaking at you, we've got 2 of them who are going to present, and then we'll move into a panel, and I'll introduce the other 2 panelists at that point with slightly longer questions to start with, so we all get up to a common position, and then we're going to discuss these sustainability assessment methods and the voluntary schemes that they are, discuss them, and then discuss a little bit more about how we might move to more mandatory. So, without further ado, our first speaker today, Shabnam from TERI, Director of the Sustainable Buildings within TERI, a really distinguished research institute in India, who also have a building assessment method, GRIHA. So, Shabnam, great to have you.
A very good afternoon to all of you, and it's an honor to be part of today's panel discussion. Traditionally, as a heritage, India or elsewhere, we have been quite conscious the way we have been building, and we have done this without any sustainability tools. So any construction or any building design, I think the thermal comforts are the integral part of any design when we start looking at the basic ingredients that go into any kind of designs. So I think we have been quite successfully designed buildings, not only in terms of forts, in terms of the traditional buildings that we have, but I think we have been quite mindful of also the kind of constructions that we have had for common people. We have used locally available materials, we have used the technologies, and they have been site context, and very region specific designs have been there traditionally, and they have all withstood the the way they are. The resilience has been an integral part of all these constructions. But in the last 50 years or 70, 80 years that we have had, I think there have been major reasons why the construction that we talk about today, why it has changed the trends, and we will dive deeper into understanding the reasons why we have been facing the situations that we are facing in India for such a long time. So as you can see that the population in India since 1950, it has almost doubled. Today we are 1.4 billion people, and as the projections are, and this is in terms of the UN's medium variant that you can see the middle line in between, and if we follow the same trend, we'll be 1.5 million by this end of this century. And if the fertility rate, if we have that from the moderate to the higher variant site, if the fertility rate is 0.5 higher than the usual, then our population will be 2.2 million. And if the if it is below 0.5, the medium range, then we will gradually decrease to 1 million. So I think land is not a luxury for sure, and from this 1.4 million, we will sure reach 1.5 if we are not mindful of the way we are constructing. And every inch of land in India, it matters to us. And if we talk about thermal comforts and we are trying to achieve it with thicker walls, I think that is something that cannot happen in an Indian context. So, we have to design, and these tools and these sustainability measures that we adopt in terms of resource efficiencies, in terms of designing it, I think that will play a very important role in the coming times. And I think what is also happening is in terms of the resources we are using, we are also encroaching upon a lot of the natural habitat, or a lot of, otherwise also we are encroaching upon the land of the other species. So I think it is not only about the population, but I think the worst is also the climate impacts that we have had seen in the past so many years. We have observed the temperatures have gone higher. There have been drought upon prone areas. There have been higher intensities of storms. The sea levels have risen, and of course it has led to, there have been floods, there have been situations where we have not been able to manage, and resilience has of course been the greatest paramount when we look at the construction industry. Now when we look at any sustainability tool, I think my advocacy would be that when we are addressing any kind of challenges in an ecosystem, the foremost important aspect that we should obviously look at is to understand the challenges that we're not only rising in population, but I think the land is shrinking. And when we design responsibly, the three main ingredients that should definitely be part of any sustainability tool is, of course, one is technology. And technology is good as long as we are using it in the right way. It has its reverse effects if it doesn't work in our favor. At the same time, the use of local materials and the age-old wisdom, they become the important ingredients of any sustainability tool. As an outcome of any sustainability tool, mitigation is one of the foremost important thing that should be looked at when we are designing buildings. Adaptation and resilience also have to be an integral part of these tools. So, when we look at any sustainability tool, we have to look at from the design perspective. We have to design it in such a way that these tools are able to address the concerns of how energy, water, waste, and other resources are looked at. So that, of course, forms the basic and the most important parameter of any sustainability tool. I think apart from that, the other two important factors are, of course, the financial factors. When we are designing buildings, we also have to ensure that the technologies that we use today, they have to be very cost effective, and that will become very unique when we look at life cycle assessments, and when we look at the overall carbon emissions in the long run. One very important factor which a sustainability tool should be addressing is the social aspects, which means that when we are living out of these buildings, it should address that we should be having a life, or it should be comfortable in terms of thermal comforts. But at the same time, what we should also look at is how the construction practices are followed, so that the people who are working in these buildings, their concerns in terms of labor health and safety are also looked at when we look at sustainability as a whole. So in general, I think these are all the important aspects which I'm sure a lot of you know about it already, but I thought I'll put it in a slide for us to make our work easier. So what GRIA is? GRIA is all about, it's a tool. It is a tool to facilitate design, construction, operation, and greenness of a project. It is something similar to what you see in USGBC, or you look at it from the BRIAM perspective. But GRIA was created in the year 2005, and it was developed with an aim so that we can look at the indigenous technologies and also promote passive design features and promote the local architecture of our country. It is based on the principles of what gets measured gets managed, and definitely it has we have taken into account that it should be a holistic tool when we look at the environmental impact that this tool has on the environment, as well as you should be able to measure the emissions that a project has, which is a base case, and what you get as a build case. So I think that comparison that we are able to draw through this tool is something that we have been able to achieve through this tool. Of course, we have looked at this design tool right from design, constructor to operation of the building, and it's based on the principles of what gets measured gets managed. Of all the recognitions that GRIA has had so far, I think the most important one is, I think I would like to capture the last one, where India has been recognized as India's own rating system, and it has to the UNFCCC the commitments that have gone, GRIA has been recognized as a tool. So I think in a nutshell what I would like to say is that the impact that GRIA has been able to create, I think these numbers are too less to say, because whatever work we are doing in India, I think we are just doing 5% of the whole work. I think there is a huge potential in our country, and I think what we see is that if the policies and the frameworks and the way urbanization is happening at a very fast pace, if we match the expectations of the people, these numbers can be 10 times or even 100 times in terms of the work that we have done. We have registered nearly 4,100 projects and nearly completed the ratings of 700 plus projects. And these are all the impact numbers which we see in terms of the tree plantation, in terms of avoiding CO2s and water, annual savings, and in terms of energy. So I'll leave these numbers with you, and I think I'll be very happy to join the panel discussion today. Thank you.
Shabnam, thank you so much. So we'll just move on to our second speaker, Liz Beardsley of US Green Building Council, Senior Policy Counsel there, who's going to present on LEED and other matters, and then we'll move into our panel discussion. Liz, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much to GCCA for inviting me today, and for all of you for being here. It's just the arrow. Here we go. So USGBC, we are celebrating our 30th year, and we've set out to transform buildings and how we design, construct, and operate them to support the planet, to support humans, to support life. And we've had, as far as impact, we hit over 100,000 certifications globally, representing over 11 billion square feet. So that's good, but that's still not transforming the market in the way that we fully want to. It's exciting to see other systems also seeing success. And we've done that through working with many partners, including the American Institute of Architects and many of our member companies, in being able to identify what is a green building, figuring out what we can measure, what the metrics look like, supporting education across the industry, and helping create this demand for green buildings. This is just our users of LEED have brought the rating system around the globe. I think we're in over 160 countries now. These are some stats from 2022. So just giving a sense of some of that impact. But here we are in 2023, and as many of you know, the idea of our rating system is that you have to continually raise the bar. So the idea is to get best practices out there, get them in use, do the education, have them taken up by the market, and then it's once they become a little more mainstream, then it's time to ratchet up again. And for all of us here at COP28 know and are hearing constantly, like, there is no more time. There's no time to wait. We have to do so much more, and the building sector is a key place to do that. So we're in the process of developing our next version of LEED, LEED V5. And we've started this really in 2022 with a series of industry conversations, asking all of you, where should we take the system? How far can we go on climate? And really like pulling that in, and we're now translating that into like an actual rating system that can be applied. We've actually launched the existing building beta this fall, so that's available for use, and the new construction system will be coming out for a comment soon. So with LEAD v5, we have restructured the goals with really 3 system goals: climate action, quality of life, and ecological conservation and restoration. And these are the overarching areas that we're working towards. And you can see here how we've divided up the points. This for the new, we have 50% of points dedicated to climate action, 25% to quality of life, and 25% to ecology. And that's guiding us in our development. And so we've developed a number of prerequisites, requirements, and credits that align with these categories and this weighting, and this is what will be coming out soon. So that brings us to embodied carbon. So we've been looking at where we are and where we need to be. I think there's what we learned in our observations of what's happening in the industry on LEAD projects and around the globe is that can be misunderstanding of where we are. So sometimes you hear like you can do 0 carbon, embodied carbon now. Oh, thank you. Other times people are concerned that there's not enough data. So we are trying to explain to our members and LEAD users where we actually are. We have enough data to act, and we do need to keep working on data. So they're not one or the other. It's an and yes situation. So we know what we can do easily. We have building LCA standards, life cycle assessment, that are available. We have industries like doing these roadmaps, and that translates into data and to metrics that are going to be usable. So eventually this will lead to more use of limits and standards. But right now, we're looking at these LCA and other metrics on more of a voluntary basis for the most part. All right. So we worked with RMI this year to release a new report. That was released in September. It's available on the website. And this really takes all this research and turns it into what building project teams can do right now. So again, sort of dispelling the point that we have to wait till there's perfect data, but showing where there's enough known and what those actions look like. And also addressing the cost question that a lot of people have. So this is really a practitioner's guide on what you can do right now. And as we're developing V5, which is pretty far along now, we are going to go big on both operational carbon and embodied carbon. So we're looking at structure, the design. You can design for a lower footprint. It's not all on the back of materials. There's a lot of different pieces that can make a difference. There's the finished products as well have a footprint. And then there's also construction waste and just the way we go about waste management. So these are some of the considerations we've given to concrete in LEAD v5, trying to require low carbon alternatives that are available. And again, the industry's done a lot to kind of mobilize that effort and to create some information and resources on where to find that. We also want to keep supporting those carbon sequestering potential technologies that are really could be game changers for all of us in a decade or however long it takes with all the new construction that's predicted globally. And then support the transition away from fossil fuel use. So with that, invite you to learn more about LEAD and look forward to the conversation.
Brilliant, Liz. Thank you very much. If I can now invite Emily and Duncan, if you grab a chair up here, and I'll get a microphone for the two of you, and we can introduce you to everyone. We've got the president of the Association of American Institute of Architects and the Royal Institute of British Architects, Duncan, on the far side. I had the pleasure of going to an event. These you're representing. Emily, you were there yourself, and Duncan, you were representing REBA here. You signed an MOU. Why don't we just bear with us? Just a quick aside. Why don't you just quickly tell us, what did you sign the other night?
Yeah, the American Institute of Architects and the Royal Institute of British Architects signed an MOU, basically solidifying the fact that we work together and that we have a lot of information to share amongst the two organizations. It also solidified our combined commitment to the climate challenge that we have, as well as recognizing what is really a breakthrough thing that has happened earlier this year, which is the mutual recognition agreement between our two regulators, NCARB in the US, ARB in the UK, for reciprocal licensure between the two countries, which really opens up the possibility for talent to move across borders, and together we represent 145,000 architects, so partners in progress.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So, I mean, you've probably said it all, but let's hand the microphone over to Duncan. So, but to sort of go back to the theme of today, but that was useful as part of the introduction. You're both, as the Royal Institute of British Architects, Duncan and Emily, American Institute of Architects, doing lots of stuff on sustainability, but you know, and you could each speak for an hour on it. But why don't you just pull out just one thing by sort of way of introduction, one thing that you're doing on sustainability, and then we'll bring you back onto assessment schemes, etc.
Oh, just to confirm why I'm here, I chair the Climate Action Expert Advisory Group for the Royal Institute of British Architects. And what I'm really excited about is the scale of our membership and the amount of data we could get from our members. And so the RIBA since 2019 has had its 2030 Climate Challenge. And that's where we offer our architects to sign up to the scheme, but crucially to declare the data. So that's embodied carbon, operational carbon, potable water, and well-being. So we've got this data and we want to share it because we learn from doing, and that's what we're able to do with this agreement. So it's really exciting to let the data go both ways. And for me, we're in the age of data, but that's great, but if we need to use it and we need to understand how to use it. So for me, this is one of the big opportunities.
Brilliant. Emily.
Well, the AIA has a couple initiatives. We also have a 2030 challenge with signatories, which is essential, a materials pledge as well. But there's one that I want to talk about, and forgive me, I'm going to read because it's a long list. But we are working with a group called the Embodied Carbon and Harmonization and Optimization, or ECHO, which is a coalition jointly led by 5 nonprofit organizations: Architecture 2030, Building Transparency, the Carbon Leadership Forum, the International Living Futures Council, and of course USGBC. And this is a group that is working with many, many others, including civil engineers and mechanical engineers. It's an agreement for us to come together to collect information regarding embodied carbon. So one of the aspects that Liz was talking about earlier, to agree on the way in which we're collecting this data, to ensure that all organizations, standard-setting organizations, professional commitment organizations, use the same data schema for databases and digital tools to gather and share a whole building project embodied carbon data in the same way. And that might seem like not a big deal, but it actually is, because when we do it individually, it's difficult for us to see the larger picture, and so just moving a little towards, but we've got more than that.
Yeah, you got way more than that. But it's interesting that you both pick things to do with data, and we'll come back to those bits, because you're right, Emily. It does sound boring, but I know it's very exciting. No, it really is. No, it really is exciting to get the harmonization, so that Duncan's data means the same as your data.
Exactly.
I mean, that's really crucial.
Yeah.
Go on, Duncan.
I just want to add something. Yeah, RIBA is one of the core members, and we've got 9 institutions at the moment working on something called the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard. So that's really exciting because we've got to get out of our different silos within the industry and then across the world as well. So we're hoping that in the spring we're going to have a set of rules that we can take to the relevant government ministry and say these are the rules to achieve the spending of our limited carbon budget in the construction sector, and that's what we can offer to across industry. And what's really exciting is we've got over 400 people working on it at the moment. It's really being taken seriously by all the institutions, and that's what I'm finding really exciting, what we're learning from different practices within our industry that we can then share across the world.
Duncan, that's brilliant. That's great. So we'll come back to that a bit more because I think that aspect is really interesting. So just on the voluntary, we'll talk about LEAD, we've got GRIHA, on these assessment schemes, as real architects, I mean, you're here representing institutions, but you're also real architects.
Are you going to ask me if I've used them?
No. Well, maybe.
Maybe.
What I'm going to ask is, what is your view as real people who use these tools? What's your view on the tools, and what do you see as development? What developments might you like to see within them to make them even more effective?
Yeah, I do have practical experience with them, and it's funny, I was thinking about when I first took my LEAD exam, 2003, right? LEAD has been around a long time, and one of the beautiful things about LEAD, to be honest, some might not say it's beautiful, that it's changed over time, and it's developed, as Liz explained, to address new challenges and to recognize, frankly, when something becomes, I'll dare say, a little too easy, then maybe it's time to move on to another priority. So I think that's exceptional, and we're seeing the introduction, obviously, BREEAM, WELL, Living Building Challenge. These are frameworks for architects to develop their expertise. It's also a way in which clients can understand the nuances of their buildings. So I see them as a tool. What is really fascinating to me is that we have some government agencies that are adopting them as mandates as well. So don't reinvent the wheel. Use these certification systems as a way to integrate into your own policy, which is extremely exciting.
Brilliant. Duncan, same question to you.
Yeah, it's been a bit more disruptive in the UK, I would say. We've had current government sort of unpledging from a lot of green initiatives that we've slightly got used to. So BREEAM, we used to have something called Code for Sustainable Homes. So that came and went. So it's been a bit rockier. So one thing that has got traction in the UK, as well as BREEAM, has been Passive House. And Passive House isn't just the UK, it's across Europe in terms of having traction. So that's been, for me, a pleasant surprise. However, what's been really interesting since lockdown, really the 2020 lockdowns, is that we've got a lot of initiatives and guidelines that give us, in effect, a whole life carbon descent plan. And that first came with an organisation called LETI, which is the Low Energy Transformation Initiative, which the RIBA are part of, RICS, all the different institutions. And that was when I first saw all the institutions coming together. And in fact, the people behind LETI are the people behind the Net Zero Carbon Building Standard we're looking at now. And that feels so positive. So I think we're about to have something really interesting that we can all understand, this straightforward whole life carbon descent plan where it's an easy sell to the clients. We've got this as a carbon budget in our industry, and these are the figures we need to achieve. We really do need legislation to enable this. And we've seen recently in the UK with a brand new fire regulation, because we had the dreadful Grenfell Tower disaster. Really impactful legislation that we just take in our stride with. We're doing it, and we need to, the carbon stuff, the climate stuff needs to be policy, and then we just deal with it.
Brilliant. If I can now invite Liz and Shabnam to join the panel. So Derek mentioned fire and resilience. That was a great segue. You hadn't even read my notes here. I wanted to just move on to resilience. Shabnam, you mentioned resilience within the scheme. You can speak to it, and Liz, I'd be interested in your view on how, climate adaptation, mitigation, climate adaptation. How are these voluntary schemes going to incorporate the requirement for resilience, resilience in general? Some of those different metrics are being exacerbated by climate change.
So I think if we want to address resilience, I think for any design, I think resilience and thermal comforts have to be an integral part of any kind of design that we are doing. And definitely, when we look at the GRIHA ratings, we have laid more emphasis on the passive design features, and we have tried to build in it in such a way that, if a designer is looking at a building, he gets more weightage in terms of the passive features, in terms of resilience, the way we have put the scores and the way we have put the weightages. That is number one. Number two is that urbanization in India is happening at a very fast pace, and in the next 30 years we will see that 40% or 50% more than that will be living out of the urban spaces. And the Indian schemes or the regulations are designed in such a way that affordability has been the paramount in terms of the way we have been constructing, because when we are looking at regulations like providing housing for all in India, so it would mean that we have to look at affordability in tandem with resilience and thermal comforts. So when we are trying to tackle one of the issues, we cannot be compromising on issues of thermal, in terms of resilience and comforts. And that is why, when we are looking at the lower income groups, or when we are looking at providing housing to all, it is important to understand that they also need to embed the features of sustainability, of resilience, and in terms of thermal comforts very well into the housing, which is not happening in the absence of these design tools, because there has to be a tool which helps them measure the progress at each stage, and how the progress, how these projects are measuring their sustainability quotient, and they can make those changes while if they feel that they are not on track. So that way I feel that whole this chain is quite embedded, and we have to look at it in such a way that all these components need to be addressed together and not in silos. And that is where these tools and GRIHA, and looking at indigenous technologies, and looking at supporting materials and technologies that are quite suited for that climate and condition, that will become an integral part of the constructions of future.
Brilliant. So if I can have the microphone down to Liz to answer on behalf of LEAD regarding how to incorporate resilience. And you drew, understandably in India, the context of one of the resilience concerns is overheating. And even in Europe, the number of deaths which we've had during periods of overheating have been in the tens of thousands. So it's a really important aspect of resilience. It's a less seen one. Hurricanes, flooding, it's much more visible. It makes the news, but overheating is much more tricky, but obviously completely in the center point of architecture and design. Liz.
Yeah, and actually in the United States, heat is the #1 cause of death from disasters as well. So it is under recognized, I think, for how serious it is. So with LEAD, many of the core criteria and strategies for sustainability also support resilience. So when you have a building that has better envelope, that requires less energy to operate, it's going to be easier to keep that at temperature and to have to meet that need if you need to go to another source or backup or what have you. Similarly with water, there's opportunities to have cisterns or other kinds of alternative water available, rainwater sources. So there's that's sort of the inherent nexus of sustainability and resilience. But you won't really achieve resilience without that intentional goal. And so, I really echo what Emily was saying, that LEAD is a tool, and you need to overlay with that the customer or the client goals, the project, very specific project goals. And so with LEAD V5, we are taking experience that we've had with some specific resilience pilot credits and putting some of those into the system. So all projects will now be required to do a resilience assessment, looking at a wide range of hazards and how that applies to the project. And then there will be additional credits for addressing them in various ways, as well as passive survivability being another component of that.
Brilliant. If we, Duncan, you just introduced a thought before, which was a collaboration between the different built environment professional institutions in developing databases and standards. which will enable us to go from voluntary assessment schemes to mandatory government regulation, etc. Do you just want to say a little bit about how it was that these different institutions came together and what it is that they are doing in order to get that policy change?
Well, yeah, I mean, our institutions are talking to each other all the time. That's behind the scenes. For me, as a practicing architect, what I noticed was in 2019 that a sort of an external other body called LETI, which was at the time called the London Energy Transformation Initiative, published its Climate Emergency Design Guide, which for me came out of nowhere. And I saw who'd signed up to it. So my own institution, the RIBA, had, but also RICS, the Institution of Structural Engineers.
Chartered Surveyors.
Yeah, Royal
Surveyors.
Institute of Chartered Surveyors,
Yep.
the Institution of Structural Engineers, Institution of Civil Engineers. Everybody had, and I was like, how did that happen? And I got in touch with the editor, and she said, yeah, 1,000 people contributed to this document. I thought, wow, we really are talking to each other. So that initiative showed that we could. It came up with a very straightforward whole life carbon descent plan. Other guidelines have come out of it. But since then, we've had the RIBA 2030 Climate Challenge, and the other institutes have done their versions. But now we're doing this other thing together, which is the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard. Now, we've got nearly 4,000 building case studies as data, so we did a call for evidence this time last year. We're now processing that data to see how we're really consuming our carbon budget, or over-consuming it, whatever we're going to see. Come the new year, like I said, we've got 400 people working on this at the moment, and we're going to come up with this set of rules that then clients and design teams can apply to meet the bits of carbon budget that we will in effect carve up for different building typologies. So we've got, you know, the UK's committed to spending a certain amount of carbon over the next 20, 25 years. And, you know, like everybody else, we're over exceeding that at the moment. But this will be, in a way, what I got from COP27 was the UN saying to us, construction sector, what does good look like? If, you know, and we need to establish that. So for me, this is one step in the right direction of defining what good looks like. Because at the moment, whole life carbon or embodied carbon calculations can say anything at the moment. We really do need to say what the rules are. And in the UK, I think we're about to agree across industry what ours are.
And if I may, just the other, where it's sort of different hat with the FIStructE, so the database of buildings that has been launched is actually version 2, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit about version 1, or you say it?
It looks like you know more about it than I do.
Okay,
God, you say.
Well, Emily, it picks up your point on the common data, so we'll come back to you. But version 1 fell over because people were putting data in, but the data wasn't consistent with other data. Now, I mean, it's, you know, we can learn from failures, can't we? I'm not pointing out, oh, it failed once, but we can learn from it. And so the learning was about the need for consistency of data, so that what goes in means that when you're comparing what you've put in and what you've put in, what you've put in, actually they are comparable because the input data is the same. And those lessons have been learned, and so therefore this version 2 database is not going to have the same problems as the first.
And it's going to continue. We're going to continue wanting calls for evidence, you know, into the future, so this thing can evolve. And
I think the other thing which you've drawn out, which I just sort of want to put in bold, is that, as you said it, the institutions across the professions collaborating have come up with a standard. So the institutions, the building sector didn't go to government and say, we need you to produce a standard, please can you produce a standard? The institutions collectively.
Well, the construction sector as well, the institutions, but also client-facing groups also are saying, what does good look like? I mean, there was a headline in the news earlier this year that the City of London Corporation saying, what's the best whole-life carbon calculation system? Please tell us. We want to fold it into you know, pre-planning guidance, but please tell us what good looks like. So, yeah, you know, it's coming from clients as well. Yeah. Everybody wants to know what good looks like now, which is great. It's a different place.
So let's go across the Atlantic. What's your experience, Emily?
It's interesting, you know, what does good look like? I just had a conversation with someone who had a great phrase, which I'm going to adopt, which was, we need to move past form-based solutions to value-based solutions. And so the AIA developed the framework for design excellence, which actually comes out of, frankly, 20 years of conversation from our Committee on the Environment. And it challenges architects with a vision, every project, every time, everywhere, to address big systemic problems and find integrative solutions. So we've created 10 measures in this framework for design excellence, which align with the UN 17 SDGs. So, for example, design for well-being is good health and well-being. Design for energy is the affordable and clean energy. Design for resources is responsible for responsible consumption and production. And it provides a framework for us to say, this is what good design looks like. It's no longer the form, the aesthetic, but what are you doing with water? What are you doing with flexibility? How are you addressing equitable communities? And my favorite one is design for delight, because it reminds us that we need to be change agents for good. We have a choice when we design buildings. We can either design something that uplifts the spirit or not. I choose to do something that's good. And so I think that struggle for what does good design look like, we have been able to provide a framework. And the next step was aligning our awards with it holistically, right? So that conversation doesn't just happen at the national level, but it starts to happen at the local level, and it becomes a tool in which you can communicate with your clients.
Brilliant. If you could just pass the microphone to your left, because that's fantastic for those who are going to do it, whose clients who see the light and are going to do it, and for even architecture firms who actually are informing clients, you need to be doing this. But how can we make it mainstream? It needs to be through policy. So Liz, if I can bring you in on the policy angle of how we can make all this good practice, what good looks like, more mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. In policy and green building there's been a lot of green building policy in the United States, and I think it's a good example to, as we have the conversation of spreading this tool for climate. And a lot of it started, there's really like probably 3 or 4 categories. First off, leadership by example. So as Emily already mentioned, government agencies, and whether federal, state, and local, have adopted green building for their buildings. And when they do that, that helps show their market. Sometimes it might be the first one in that community, and people can learn about it, they see it, and as it starts to spread over multiple public buildings, then the market gets used to it, the contractors learn about it, and there's been like academic studies showing that there's a spillover effect to the private market as well as to peer cities, in the region. So that's really important. And then beyond that, there can be incentives that for private sector buildings. So we see that a lot in the city level and sometimes at the state level, where there's a recognition that high-performing, sustainable building will draw less resources, and it's something that aligns with the jurisdiction's goals. So there's a whole suite of non-financial incentives like increased floor area, as well as financial ones. And then beyond that, there's like looking at embodied carbon specifically, there's some procurement policies that are now coming into play. There's been really an explosion in the embodied carbon policies, particularly because the green building policies are fairly mature. So we're seeing procurement where government is saying we want to procure lower carbon materials, and they'll do that through either specifying a target or other methods, but trying to work that into so that on their own projects, again, they're able to specify because they're the buyer, they're the owner. So that's a good tool. And then being able to share those guidelines as well with the private sector so that others could use similar criteria and specs if they choose to do that. And then we're seeing in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, the federal government's investing in environmental product declarations in a big way. So our Environmental Protection Agency is supporting development of EPDs in multiple sectors for construction materials. So that's really exciting. And I think we're really going to just see a huge growth in the next 5 to 10 years of these tools.
Yeah, and Liz, you showed that graph about where we are on that emergence of data and where we are now, where we need to be. And that really is a turbocharging what the federal government's doing with the IRA in terms of the delivery of EPDs from the materials sector. because that's what you as the architecture and design community need to be able to work out what your carbon footprint of your building is to have the component parts from the materials. And the material producers and from the concrete side of things, I can say that they are equipped to do that. We've got an EPD tool that GCCA members have funded the development of and evolution of for the last 9 years. That's available to all our members and non-members to deliver those EPDs, just as you need to go up that curve in terms of data. Shabnam, you were writing down. I've been at various panels this week, and I hear moderators ask questions, and the panelist goes, yes, but what I first want to say. So maybe I'm not going to ask a question. What is it you want to say? But I'm going to ask you to ask questions in a minute. Shabnam.
So I just wanted to take the point from that regulations making mandatory it, elsewhere. But I think from the Indian context, what I would like to say is that there are 4 or 5 ratings that are existing in our country. But I think from regulation point of view, what is important right now is that a user should have that one unified code, and he should be following one path for sustainability. We could all be achieving it differently, but it should mean the same for everyone. So I think that is the first step that the government should take, and I think what the government is doing now is that we have energy code which is called the Energy Conservation Building Code, but very recently what we have done is that we have also built in the concept of sustainability in this code, and what they are ensuring is that they are looking at all the rating systems that are existing in our country and trying to build in a system that is more, I think, relatable and which people can adopt easily. I think that is number one. I think the second point, what I would like to say is that, as a user, I should have that informed choice. I should have that information that is available on some credible source where I can get those information of the kind of materials that are available in the market, on kind of technologies, and I need not be looking at very expensive consultants or features or somebody to help me out with my design strategies. So a user, in form of case studies probably, in form of simple to use design tools, and something that is you and I can use and see that what those results mean to my project. So I think that is something that is missing, and I think if we are able to build that will help us. In terms of data, I think government is doing a lot of work in collecting this data, but I still feel with all the good work that we have done so far, we have just built 5 to 10% of the buildings in India that is green. So there is a long way to go. As I said that urbanization is happening, and we don't want to make the same mistakes of not capturing this data and not making it work in the right direction. And that is one reason that these sustainability tools, especially the work that is done at GIRI, that makes a lot of sense to the end user. But what we are trying to do in our rating is that we are not creating something that is new. We are putting all these regulations that are existing in various areas, be it water, be it waste, be it energy. GIRI is trying to put all these things together at one place, and this is what a user is expected to do, is something that we are presenting it to him. So that is something that a regulator, we try and being an implementing arm of the regulator rather than expecting something from them, and ensuring that we deliver as per their expectations.
Yeah, brilliant. Emily, do you wanted to come in there?
Well, I think for me, and I said this yesterday on another panel, architects are leading, but we will will continue to lead, but we also have a unique challenge, and I think codes and standards are an incredible opportunity for us to support sustainable design. And frankly, as architects, give us a much stronger position with our clients. It allows us, to have a little bit more teeth in the game, or whatever. Sorry, bad pun. When we discuss lowest cost, it's more than just affordability. It's looking for climate-forward solutions with our clients. And when those standards and codes are in place, we can confidently tell clients, your jurisdiction is committed to this and recognizes its importance. So we ask our policymakers to give us standards and codes that support climate action, and we can make sure that we come up with the best solution. And I think that allows us to, frankly, be as creative as we need to be, and gives us a little bit more argument when we get pushback on the affordability side.
Yeah, brilliant. I said I'd open it to the floor if anyone's got any questions on the floor. Just while you're thinking of that, just where you're sitting, just 2 or 3 days earlier, we had the American Concrete Institute present, and they've got a forthcoming standard on low carbon concrete, which is, you know, a key building block of just what you're calling for, Emily, in terms of having the standards that can be relied on and mandated and required by clients, which then a design team can then deliver to. Yeah. Yes. We'll pass the microphone.
Thanks. Phoebe McDonald from the RIBA. Do you think there's anything that the UK can learn from the US in terms of policy and regulation and how we could get it embedded quicker?
I don't know if I know enough about UK policy to do a comparison, but as I was saying earlier, there are some emerging areas of policy in the US, so to the extent those are also emerging, definitely that procurement piece. There's no reason, if you're, whether you're government or private, if you're buying something, if you're buying a building design, you can say what you want, right? So that's an easy one. And that's where the architects and organizations like mine and can help identify, like, how do you actually say that? How do you ask for that in your specs? So that's one thing. You know, I think we have come up with a new way of addressing operational carbon through what's called building performance standards, and there is interest in trying to evolve those to incorporate embodied carbon. So this because in the US there's really been the sense that once a building's built, it's kind of grandfathered from regulation unless there's an addition or a major renovation. So that's been a, I don't know, cultural legal constraint for us to improve our existing building stock. But that's changing with this new approach of building energy performance standards, and it may eventually include some embodied carbon and become more of a comprehensive regulation approach that includes both new and existing. That's a little ways off, but I think people are thinking about that.
Do you want to respond, Duncan?
Just
no,
very
yeah,
quickly,
please.
like Liz, I don't know enough about the policy aspect of it to be able to compare both. But I will say, you know, I think looking to cities and ways in which they're doing some innovative things, such as future carbon tax to incentivize. What I would say is, I think one of the opportunities that we have is thinking more about how we can, obviously there's the federal procurement, but ways in which it's less about what policies or standards that you have and moving past the affordability issue for availability. And that also goes into trade, that goes into codes, that goes into standards, and I think a holistic look at not just the design of the building, but also the sourcing of things can be a much larger conversation.
In the UK, I think where I get quite a lot of optimism from is from our cities. With, you know, there's a lot of cities, for example, in the UK that have circular economy route maps with ambitious pledges to design out waste, etc., and design buildings as material stores for the future, etc. And I'm seeing construction sites adhering to these guidelines. I mean, in some cases you can't get planning approval without these local guidelines. So I often say cities are the future, actually, from the point of view of legislation, because people are having to adhere to their guidelines, which can be way above what are national guidelines in the UK.
Yeah, they could be more fleet of foot, can't they, at a local?
And they often they need to be, because it's actually solving a big problem for said city. For you know, whether it's because they declared very loudly they wanted to be net zero carbon by 2030, and then realised, I don't know, have a clue how to do that, and then realised the built environment might be very helpful. So it works on from a regional point of view, from a point of view of politics.
Yeah.
So that's great. The other thing I'd say, in the UK we do have Part P of the building Part O of the building regulations, which is the overheating new part, which is national guidelines, and suddenly becoming quite an enabler in terms of resilience, because we get buildings that overheat a lot in the summer now, and now we're having to design that out. And we're also getting clients who are understanding what Part O is, saying, well, can you design, and I've had this a few times recently, can you design your building for 2040 in mind? So that's suddenly, and then you're just wholeheartedly dealing with resilience because of that Part P of the building regs, which just seem to come in with no fuss and is actually incredibly impactful.
Yeah, brilliant. Emily?
Just very quickly. Unfortunately, sustainability is politicized in our in the U.S. Because we're in the federal system and we've got some states that believe in climate change and some don't. That's a whole other conversation. What we found is that moving the conversation less of it's the green thing, it's the moral thing, it's the sustainability thing, is really leaning into resilience. Because at the end of the day, resilience typically means you're going to protect your assets or you will pay lower in terms of operational energy. And finding that right route, and you know, that's, if I flip the question, what can the US learn from the UK? How can we depoliticize climate change so that we no longer have to debate whether it exists or not?
Get yourself a king.
So I was going to draw it to an end, but we definitely need to draw it to an end now. So
Hard pass.
I guess I think that point you've talked about resilience, you've talked about addressing overheating, and the challenge of the assessment methods is that sustainability is such a broad spectrum. So how do you and you've explained, you know, GRI and LEAD, and you've over decades now, you've wrestled with taking the social and the economic and the environmental and trying to put it all into one scheme. Things that have got different measures, you know, CO2 and use of water are different metrics. How do you weight them with each other? And we saw your new weighting for version 5, 50% on climate actions. How do you weight those different things? Even within carbon, there's the issue of, you know, operational embodied, and you know, certainly my perception is that we sometimes, the pendulum swings of the importance of operational carbon to the importance of embodied carbon. And you know, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, that we need to make sure we consider whole life carbon over the whole life of the building, so, and that we get the interaction. So if you invest more in the passive design, as you've got higher embodied carbon version on the embodied, because if you've got the passive design, you've actually got the savings in the operational, and you've got the greater resilience. And making sure that we keep that holistically, that carbon story, within the holistically of everything else. And you know, in my notes, I was going to talk about responsible sourcing. We haven't even touched on responsible sourcing of product, and it's absolutely key. And we're delighted that LEAD is recognizing the Global Concrete Sustainability Council scheme for responsible source concrete. Concrete has a very short supply chain, few constituents. It's a heavy material. It doesn't travel far, so it's very easy to communicate and validate, certify the chain of custody, and the labour requirements, etc. So those aspects within these schemes is really important. But and we've got one question here, but I'm actually going to invite you to ask the question of the panelists afterwards, because people are going to disappear to the next event that starts on the hour. Please, can you join me online? Join me virtually in thanking our speakers and panelists today. Thank you very much.